Ray. What do you want to do tonight?
Same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Psst. Hit the notification bell to catch every video.
This is Justin from YouAreCreators, and today on YouAreCreators Podcast, I have the great and powerful Robert Schwartz. Thank you, Robert, for being.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Justin.
Robert's book, Your Soul's Plan, is life-changing. This answers so many questions for me, Robert. So many questions I have. And I want to know, how did you get started in this research?
Well, what happened for me, Justin, believe it or not, I was in the corporate world for a number of years, self-employed as a marketing and communications consultant, basically doing corporate writing. And I did not enjoy that at all. It was deeply unfulfilling, and perhaps more to the point, I had this nagging sense that I had come to Earth to do something else that I wasn't doing, but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't even know how to figure out what it was. And then things came to a head in 2003. I basically had an existential crisis about my life. And I tried different ways to resolve it. Nothing was really working. And then this idea came to me, go see a psychic medium. Now, you have to understand, I come from a very mainstream background. Mediumship is not part of that background. I'd never been to a medium. I didn't know anybody who had. I wasn't even sure if I believed in it, but nothing else was working, and I was really in a crisis. So I thought, why not give it a try? So I did this on May 7 of 2003. And I remember the date because that was the day on which my life changed. The medium started the session by saying, your spirit guides are here. And I said, what is a spirit guide? I mean, I've never even heard the term before. So she explained that. And then she said, your guides would like to talk directly with you. And she started to channel them. The first thing they said right out of the box was, you planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born. And I will tell you, I just shook my head and I said, well, why in the world would I do something like that? And they said, you did this for purposes of spiritual growth. Then it got really impressive because they launched into this detailed explanation of each one of my challenges and why I had planned it. The reason this was so impressive and compelling to me is that I hadn't told the medium anything about myself prior to the session, nor had I told the guides anything about myself during the session. So they knew literally everything about me without me saying a single word. Well, that just completely blew my mind. And it came out of that session, and I just couldn't stop thinking about this idea. I planned my life. I planned my challenges. I thought about it constantly. And over a period of a few weeks, the effect that this awareness had on me is that it really created quite a deep healing, because it allowed me for the first time to see deeper meaning and deeper purpose to my biggest challenges. And then I realized, if this can create this kind of healing for me, it can do the same for other people. And that was when I started to think about writing a book on the subject. And then a couple other very important things happened shortly thereafter. I was introduced to a woman who can channel her soul. And I had the extraordinary opportunity to spend about 15 hours over 5 sessions talking to her soul about pre-birth planning. And her soul confirmed everything my guides had said to me through the medium. And then just a few weeks after that session with the medium, I had this spiritually transformative experience, or STE, as some people call it, where I was just walking down the sidewalk in the middle of a weekday afternoon. And all of a sudden, I was overcome by this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional love for every person I saw. This was a divine love, a transcendent love. It was way beyond a human love. And these are the words that get closest to it in English, but it was just, it defies description. And as this was happening, I was caused to know, you could say I was caused to know that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. I got the message loud and clear. What I didn't know was why this was happening at that time. That actually became clear a couple of years later. By that time, I'd looked at a lot of people's pre-birth plans for my first book, Your Soul's Plan. And what I found was that every single plan was based on complete unconditional love for every person involved, no matter what was being planned. And then I realized, That experience walking down the sidewalk a couple of years ago, that was gifted to me so that when I found this result in my research, I would be certain that what I was finding was true. So the combination of those three things, that got me to leave the corporate world, start writing Your Soul's Plan. 3 years later, it came out, and now I have a much more fulfilling life in which I'm doing what I came here to do.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so for people that don't know, what are spirit guides?
A spirit guide is a non-physical being, somebody who's back on the other side, who communicates with you about your life and go in this direction, don't go in that direction, try this idea, don't try that idea. Some people can hear their spirit guides in words, and the term for that is clairaudient. I myself am not clairaudient, although I have occasionally received clairaudient communication. But mostly guides communicate through feeling. You know, when you get a feeling of rightness, you just know that something is right for you, or it's right to go in this direction, or it's not right. Those feelings are often coming from your guides. A loved one who has transitioned does sometimes become one of your guides. But sometimes the guides are much more highly evolved beings who may not even need to incarnate on Earth anymore. They've moved beyond that. And so they're just helping us from the other side.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Wow. So, okay. So from your research, you found out that we kind of pre-plan certain things to happen, like challenges and illnesses. And
I did. And I should explain how I figured this out. 2 ways I found out information about people's pre-birth plans. In the first 2 books, the one you held up, Your Soul's Plan, and then the second, Your Soul's Gift, I did sessions with mediums and channels who in one way or another could find out what somebody's pre-birth plan was. They come at it in very different ways, but they have access to that information. Now, in the new book that came out a couple of years ago, Your Soul's Love, there are still the sessions with mediums and channels, but this time I incorporated the hypnosis that I do. It's called a between lives soul regression. And the client, while in a trance state, will speak to what is called their council of elders, the beings who oversee their evolution. This is higher even than the spirit guide. And they'll ask any questions they have about their life plan and get the information directly. Most clients ask, what did I plan? Why? How am I doing? And how can I do better? But you can ask literally any question of your council of elders. And if it's for your highest good to know the answer, they will give you the answer. So I did these kinds of sessions with many, many people for the books. I focused on the pre-birth planning of challenges because that's where the need for understanding is. You know, it's when something joyful happens, nobody says, why is this happening to me? You know, you just enjoy it, right?
Right.
But it's when something quote unquote bad happens, then everybody wants to know, why did this happen? What does it mean? How do we respond to it? So between the 3 books, I cover pretty much every major challenge we have here in the Earth School. And the intention is to give deeper meaning to suffering that to most people appears not to have any deeper meaning.
Interesting. Okay, so you call Earth a school.
Very much so.
Why is that?
I think the bottom line purpose why we are here is to learn, to grow. And you could then ask, well, what is it that we're learning? Well, there are many, many different lessons. But what I found in the research for the books, all of the lessons we learn in the Earth School have a common denominator. If you distill them down, what we're really doing here is learning how to more freely and fully give and receive love. That is the bottom line purpose for just about everybody's incarnation in the Earth School.
Wow. Okay, so in your book, page 69, you talked about us creating our reality. And that's what I love. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, and this is an important subject because when people hear about the idea of pre-birth planning, sometimes they assume that means that everything is predestined, and that is not what a pre-birth plan means. There are a small number of things that are written in stone. For example, your choice of parents. Once you're born, obviously you can't choose who your parents are. Or if you plan, for example, to be born with a physical handicap, that can't be treated by medical science in the time period you're incarnating in, which is something you would know. Then short of what we call a miracle, you're going to have that handicap for that lifetime. But the number of things set in stone like that is really very small. Almost always, pre-birth plan means planned as a potential. And whether or not the potential actualizes depends entirely on your and other people's free will decisions. So there's this intersection between pre-birth planning and the use of our free will.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, so certain challenges can be overcome once you learn the lesson. How can you find the lesson?
Well, one thing you can do is read the books. A lot of the lessons are laid out there very, very clearly. You can do a between life soul regression and just ask your council of elders. But something that's much easier and perhaps more direct, anytime something happens, ask yourself the following question. If I planned this before I was born, why might I have done that? When you phrase the question that way, it doesn't even require you to believe in pre-birth planning. You're just saying, if I planned this, why might I have done that? And then you're not really looking for an intellectual answer. You're looking for an answer from spirit, from God or your guides, a higher power, whatever you conceive of that to be. And that answer may come in words, it might come in images, it might come in feelings, it might come in synchronicities. It can come in a lot of different forms. After you ask the question, you're responsible for seeing the answer when it pops up in your life.
Okay. What is our relationship with Source or God?
I believe that each one of us is what you could call a spark of the soul, and that the soul is a spark of God. So God, in my conception, is an omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent being. And God places a very, very small portion of God's total energy in a soul. And then the soul places a small portion of its energy in a human body as what we call a personality. But since God is omnipresent, God is present in the soul, God is present in the incarnate personality, God is present in literally everything, everywhere.
Wow. Okay, so from all your research, what is the one lesson you want my audience to take with them?
I would take the lesson I mentioned a moment ago, that you are in a body on planet Earth, learning how to more freely and fully give and receive love. And to really understand what that lesson means, you also have to understand that the average person has many, what I call blocks to love. So what would a block to love be? Well, it could be anger, lack of forgiveness, lack of understanding, fear. Fear is probably the most common block to love. It's endemic all across the planet. The perception that you are a separate being, that's actually an illusion, and that itself is a block to love. The fact of the matter is there's actually only one being in existence in the universe. Each one of us is like a cell in the body of God, which again is omnipresent. But the fact that you are limited by the five senses while you're here in a body, it makes it seem as though you are this separate being. And then the world starts to look like a dangerous place. And the ego mind starts thinking things like, well, I've got to get mine and I've got to protect myself from that person over there. That kind of fear-based orientation will lead you away from love. That's a block to love.
Wow. What did you find out about reincarnation, Rob?
Reincarnation is a valid phenomenon. It's something that the vast, vast majority of us do many, many times. Many people believe that they must have been forced to reincarnate, because you hear people say things like, well, I would never choose to come to a place like this, or I would never choose a life like this. That's not my understanding. My understanding is nobody is forced to do anything they don't want to do. And you chose the life that you have. You chose to be in a body on planet Earth. Now, I understand that that may seem unbelievable to some people, but what I found in the research for the books, When we're back on the other side planning a life, we have a very different perspective than we do when we're here. From the other side, you know that a life is actually very brief, that nobody is permanently harmed by anything that happens here, and yet the wisdom will become part of you literally for all eternity. So from that perspective, it actually does make sense that people would plan difficult lives.
Wow. Wow. So many questions, so little time. Wow. Okay, so what have you discovered regarding life on other planets?
I haven't looked at that much in my research.
Okay.
It does occasionally come up in a session here or there with the mediums and channels when we're looking at the pre-birth planning of life challenges. So my understanding is that life on other planets can be very different, and pretty much everything you can think of and a lot of things you can't think of are out there somewhere in an infinite universe. Mm-hmm. So there are planets, as I understand it, that are covered completely in water. There are planets that are devoted to healing. That's the sole purpose of the planet. And those planets will have temples of healing on them. So many, many different things out there. But I have really focused on the pre-birth planning of challenges in the Earth School.
Okay. What can people do to help heal themselves?
There are a lot of things you can do to heal yourself. I think one of the most important is not to try too hard to heal yourself. So we talked about blocks to love. When you engage in, I call it efforting. When you engage in a lot of efforting, the energy of that is to some extent a block to the universe's love coming into your energy field. So if you want healing energy from source, from the universe to come into you, it's actually very important just to relax as much as you can. If you're just running around trying one healing modality after another, all of that efforting, that strain, that intensity, that blocks healing energies from coming in. So I read a great quote in a channeling recently. The channel consciousness said, the sole purpose of time is to learn how to relax into the rest that restores sane perception. How to relax into the rest that restores sane perception. When they talk about sane perception, that's a reference to the ego. From spirit's point of view, the ego is actually insane. And these thoughts that you hear going through your mind all day, that's the ego. The ego speaks quite loudly. Source, spirit, whispers. So that's one of the reasons relaxing is so very important. You want to get so relaxed that the ego mind stops talking or isn't talking too much. And then what comes in, that's when the healing comes in. That's when the higher divine inspiration comes in.
Wow. Rob, where can my audience find more of you?
My website is yoursoulsplan.com. I invite people to sign up for the newsletter when you first get to the website. It'll just pop up on the homepage. Check out the events page. We have a lot of online workshops in which you can do a between life soul regression as part of a group. It's much less expensive that way. You can talk to your counsel, ask any questions you have about your pre-birth plan. If you're interested in a private session, click on the sessions page. If you have a question for me, just go to the contact page.
Wow. Rob, thank you so very much for being a guest on YouAreCreators Podcast. I appreciate it. Really, I do.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you're doing this. I think it's a much needed service and you're bringing a lot of light into our world.
Thank you, sir. This is Justin from YouAreCreators Podcast, and we love you. See you next time.